I had heard that there were people in Dharamsala, India, who were familiar with the word Dilog, Tibetans who had had near-death experiences. When I checked in with the receptionist at the Dalai Lama's office, he suggested that I speak with Lhakdor, the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, and Lhakdor graciously consented to this interview. Geshe, you're familiar with the near-death experience?
Yeah.
And what's the Tibetan view on it? I understand that many Americans are discussing this subject, but the Tibetans have a particularly compassionate view about it. So how do you see this?
You see, it's a very interesting thing because near-death experience is one thing. In Tibetan society, we have people who had that experience. We call them Delo. That means those who have died and came back. So when they, just as we say in the West, those people who had near-death experience come back with a totally new experience, they become more, compassionate, feel more connected to the rest of the people, things like that. And we say the same thing in the case of Delok. They come back and then they become very religious and they have so many things to say based on their own experience. But what is really important here to think is, in Buddhism there is a teaching called suffering is introduction to happiness. Okay, so it's not only like people who had near-death experience, but even those people who had been sick and ill and bedridden for some time, then they get back their health. Not necessarily a very long time, but at least for some time they become much better.
Mm-hmm.
You see, that's the thing.
Right.
So it's only when you face some difficulties, some challenges, and through which you see the reality, then you see the futility of the stupid things that we do in the world, like killing each other, by mean each other, exploiting each other, engaging in corruption. You see the futility of all this, because when you die, then you are able to see clearly that none of these are useful. Mm-hmm. Or when you're about to die, also you are able to see that these are of not much use. So what is really useful at that time is if you have cultivated a proper way of thinking, a compassionate, loving mind. If you have cultivated that, then that mental habit will go with you for this life, for next life, and if you are somebody who believes in many lives, it will continue for many lives.
Right.
So those kind of positive deeds, we call them your best teacher, your best friend, your food, your clothing, everything when you go to the next world. Because when you go to the next world, you don't take any of the material accumulations that you have right now, including your plastic card. You can't take any of those things with you.
Yeah.
So what you can take with you is if you have that right frame of the mind. You see? So those people who had this near-death experience or who are able to escape from a prison or something like that, then they start appreciating life. You see? Mm-hmm. Because then you see the reality. But ordinarily, unfortunately, we close our eye to the reality, People don't even want to hear about death, you see. As if it is something that is very unbecoming. But the reality is that we all are born, we all, get sick, we all we all age and we all die. That's the reality. So that's why that was the first teaching that the Buddha gave, the teaching on Four Noble Truth. And the first truth was the truth of the suffering. And in that connection he said, suffering, birth is suffering. Now how many of us know this? We say happy birthday. Mm-hmm. So who is right? I'm not saying that you should not celebrate happy birthday, you can. But if you look at the first thing that the child does after coming into this world, was it laughing or crying? You see? The first thing that the child does after the birth is crying. So that means he's suffering, you see. And then of course aging, it's happening right from the first moment of the birth, aging starts. Then in between all kind of illnesses, sicknesses and so forth. Then finally death, nobody can escape from dying. So if you are somebody who has some insight into this reality that is there with all of us, without exception, rich or poor, developed country or not developed country, it's like that something that everybody has to experience. Now if you have that experience, you will be nicer to other people. Like for example, in one of the Buddhist teaching, it says you don't have to kill people; they will die. See, as simple as that. You see, so this is very much dependent upon how much knowledge you have about the reality.
Right.
So it's important to see the reality.
I think in the West, science maintains that consciousness must be produced by the brain, and therefore there's a lessened emphasis on morality and kindness, because when the brain goes, then the consciousness goes, and there are no repercussions of the actions that you have done. But in Buddhism, the situation is completely different.
But I must say that for the goodness of everybody, even if you don't believe in future life, I think it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But this life is there, whether you're Buddhist or scientist, this life is here. So in that context, even scientists, they are also for good life. They also want to live an ethical life. So therefore it is important to find a way of life which is not based on any religion. So it should be based on common sense, common experience, and maybe scientific findings that this is good for you, for this life. So then the good thing is, if you take care of this life, if there is a future life, it will take care of you itself, because you have planted the seed.
Right.
But even if you believe many lives, but in this life you are notorious and do all the bad things, you will have very negative consequences.
Jane, did you have a question?
Yes, in my experience, what I had, I was told exactly by whatever, my higher consciousness, that all the answers are within.
Exactly.
That I have to look within myself rather than going out and asking people what to do, what not to do. And the other thing I was told that how I was not the center of the universe. Like I was kind of a insignificant entity in the bigger picture of the universe. Before that, I thought I was a very important person, and I was, like you said, I was tangled in all these things. What do you have to say about this?
This is absolutely true, because in Buddhism we say much of the problem that most of the problem that you encounter in this life is because of egoism, that I am the center of the world, I am very important. And for myself I should ignore everybody else. That is said to be, we call that ignorance, and that ignorance is said to be the foundation of all our sufferings in our life. So therefore it's very clear that you are a small, insignificant part,
Of the bigger universe.
bigger universe. And then, like according to the Buddha's teaching, although he had shown the path, but having shown the path, he said, I have shown the path to liberation. Liberation is up to you. I can only show, I'm like a class teacher, I can show you the path. Then if you don't do the homework, you will fail. Nothing I can do. I can't show a magic and then put you in the heaven, you see. So Buddha, like unequivocal terms, he said it very clearly that the self-responsibility, each of us have that responsibility, and he said each of you have the Buddha nature, Buddha potential. That means to develop to the fullest state. And this your question reminded me another beautiful verse written by one Tibetan teacher, who said that there is nobody who will catch hold of your hand and throw you into heaven. Similarly, there is nobody who will catch hold of your leg and drag you into hell. Your happiness and your suffering is in your hand. Do not cheat yourself. So at the end of the day, it is you see. If you want that long-lasting peace, long-lasting happiness, you need to develop that inner insight to experience that. But ordinarily, especially in today's world, people think, my happiness will come from money. My happiness will come from family. Yes, you get some happiness, but here we are talking about long-lasting peace and happiness. That you cannot get from what is outside of you. It has to be cultivated from within.
Geshe, I have one last question.
Yeah.
Why is it that when people approach death, oftentimes their consciousness is enhanced? It is magnified. It becomes more clear. Why does that sometimes happen?
Because as I said, when we are alive, especially for example when we are not sleeping in the day, we are using only the grosser consciousness, primarily the senses, eye sense consciousness, ear sense consciousness, the sense consciousnesses. You are not even giving much opportunity to the mental consciousness. Forget about using the subtle consciousness. But when you sleep, then you withdraw the sense consciousness. The mind becomes a little bit subtle, but it's just subtle and you're not able to use it, you're not able to practice it. But when you die, then you go into the, especially when you separate the mind from the body, then the mind that separates from the body is the subtlemost consciousness. So you're right in saying that it's enhanced, not in terms of like good or bad, but in terms of being able to see the actual potential of the mind. Because otherwise you are using only the grosser level, the surface level of the mind. But when you withdraw all the gross consciousnesses, then finally you are able to see face to face the subtlemost consciousness, which is almost like merging into the space. Yeah.
Okay, Geshe, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
And I got one question
Yeah.
from you.
Yeah.
How you become a monk?
In Tibet, like more than 95% of the population are Buddhist. So every family encourages their son and daughter to become a monk or nun. So even when I was small, they used to call me a monk, even when I was not a monk, So I just continued like that. I had no idea what I was doing.
No, if I want to become a monk
Yeah.
now, what I have to go through? That's what my question is.
Changing the clothes is easy. You can buy it from the
No,
market.
it's not a changing.
Yeah,
of
no, I'm
clothes,
telling you,
but,
I'm telling you.
I'm
So
sorry.
when you become monk, you undertake 3 changes. Change of name, change of cloth, costume, and changing the name, changing the mind. So that's the most difficult, changing the mind. Changing the name, okay, you get now name of an ordination. Changing the cloth, you do away with your layman's clothes and you wear this kind of. So these are like reminders. But changing the attitude, now the changing the attitude is very difficult task. I mean, you cannot change your attitude right there on the spot. But what it means is that now you are able to see the limitation of this whole cycle of existence that we have here. You can see the sufferings. And therefore you develop what is called as a renunciation, the wish to get away from this entanglement, by going after superficial pleasures and things like that. So through that way, then your whole focus will be towards positive virtuous practices, towards Buddhahood, enlightenment. And the purpose is not to become Buddha and then relax, but the purpose is to be able to continuously guide people, help not only human beings, but help all sentient beings. So that is the task. It's a huge task.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.